from the BBC World Service in association with ABC and All India Radio. This is Stumped.
Hello and welcome to Stumped, your intercontinental hit of news, features and debate from the quirky world of cricket. I'm Alison Mitchell in London, where early season cricket has begun. The traditional curtain raiser to the English season is the county champion match, which takes place in Dubai now, where you'd be sure the April sun would shine, or even the March sun, except that it rained in the desert. Can you believe it? And the match between Surrey and the MCC was drawn on the final day. But it's good to know that cricket is starting up in the English summer.
Hi, it's Jim Maxwell. We're at the fag end of the cricket season here. The Shield finals on as we speak, and the two old stalwarts of Australian cricket, New South Wales and Victoria, us and the Mexicans, are playing this final. And so far it's been a very competitive game and a nice way for the season to end, even though the venue is not a major cricket ground, but it will be from here on because it's the new home of Victorian cricket, St Kilda Oval, which goes under some other name, I think, but we'll remember it as that because that's where Shane Warne, amongst others, was famous in his day.
Maybe that county champion match ought to shift from Dubai to Bangalore. I'm Charu Sharma for All India Radio. It's been a quiet week for me for a change. And it is the hottest part of the year, by the way, in Bangalore, but that has not kept me away from the golf course or the tennis courts. But all eyes, as you can imagine, of course, are now firmly on the IPL.
Yes, and it will be no surprise, Charu, to know that we're starting by talking about the IPL this week, because we're going to dive straight into the controversy that has split the world of cricket. Like a scary movie, it's the return of the Mankad. And it happened in a big IPL game on Monday night when Rajasthan Royals batsman Jos Buttler was run out whilst backing up at the non-striker's end by Kings 11 Punjab bowler Ravi Ashwin. Now, it's always been a controversial dismissal, a contentious dismissal. However, it is written into the laws of the game. Now, I need to just describe exactly what happened here. So Ashwin comes into bowl. Buttler, as the bowler is running in, starts moving towards the crease, getting ready to run. He's got the bat on the ground, trailing behind him, and his eyes are facing the batter on strike. Ashwin approaches the stumps as normal, loads up, but instead of delivering the ball, pulls up. Buttler hasn't realised, so keeps moving forward and moves then out of the crease, at which point Ashwin then takes off the bails and appeals. Charu, over to you on this one. Just first of all, tell everyone why we call it the Mankad.
Well, all of India, certainly Mankad's family, wishes this would change, and it's attributed to somebody else. But yeah, Mankad was one of India's finest all-rounders, wonderful spinner as well. And this happened, of course, back in 1947, where he did run out of batsmen, despite, by the way, in that case, after at least 2 or 3 warnings. So he was well within the spirit as well as the law of the game, so he thinks. And there was a recent article from his surviving son, Rahul Mankad, who, of course, says that, please, can we use some other term instead of Mankad, because it goes down to the rest of the family too, doesn't it? But yeah, he was the first recorded in international cricket, and therefore the name Mankad. But it's just, I'm sure we can get some other term to define what happens here, run out by the bowler or whatever. But it's within the laws, isn't it? Yep.
Yeah, exactly. It's law 41.16. A run out when the non-striker has left his or her ground early. That's what it comes under. Jim, was there anything wrong with this dismissal as you saw it?
Not in terms of the law, not at all. I suppose we have a certain morality in the game of cricket. And in fairness, I suppose Ashwin could have warned Buttler. So it leaves a bad taste for some. But the fact is, if you are backing up, you have to make sure you don't leave the station before the train is supposed to be moving. So Butler's had some form in this area, and I would have thought he should be more aware of the situation. It always leaves a bit of a bad taste, but Ashwin was quite within the laws of the game, and that's been made clear on a number of occasions when this has occurred. You don't have to warn the batsman. Some would like to think, with the old-fashioned notions of sportsmanship that exist in the game of cricket, that should always be the case. But there it is.
So, Charu, the big question for me simply, okay, Ashwin appealed. Let's just look at that point to begin with, the spirit of the game, rights or wrongs of sort of his actions we'll come to in a moment. But should Buttler have been given out?
Well, according to the rules of the game, absolutely. I mean, why would somebody give a batsman who's been run out not out? Because he was clearly well away from his crease. But, if one extends this laws versus the spirit of the game argument, one can get into a rather silly corner. I mean, batsmen don't walk, and that's within the spirit of the game. If you've nicked, you walk, but who does? Batsmen claim catches when, of course, perhaps they may or may not know it's a fair catch. And against, the spirit of the game, perhaps they should not claim catches. And, of course, people around the world have. No player on the field warns any opponent, Alison, about what is to come. I mean, a fast bowler bounces a number 11 with the intention of perhaps hurting him without warning, or a batsman sweeps hard onto the forward short leg without warning. So this whole business about warning somebody who's taking unfair advantage has been romanticized enough. And I think, the game is tough enough for the bowlers, and nobody is happy to concede a single or sometimes even a double. And we know that games these days, the short format is won by just a run or two once in a while, just because the non-striker has a massive illegal advantage. So, once in a while, the bowler has to play villain to keep the batsman honest, I think.
See, I'm going to disagree with both of you on the actual dismissal, because I believe Buttler should have been given not out by the letter of the law. Exactly. So you look at the wording of the law, and to be given out, Buttler would have had to have been out of his ground at, quote, the instant when the bowler would normally have been expected to release the ball. Now, there's two sort of issues that come from this. Now, from the benefit of multiple replays that we've been able to see since this all happened, and slow-mos and split screens, one with Ashwin in his normal delivery, and then one of the moment when Ashwin pulled up, paused, waited for Buttler to continue his forward motion out of the crease, and then took off the bails. So at the instant that Ashwin would have normally have delivered the ball, I think there's enough evidence there from what I've seen on multiple replays after the event to show that actually Buttler would still have been in his ground.
But he wasn't.
No, he wasn't at the moment the bails were removed, but that's not what a run out under this law is judged on. The run out is judged at were the bails removed, was he out of his ground when the bowler would normally have been expected to release the ball. And Buttler, by the video replays, I don't think was out of his ground at the instance when Ashwin would have normally released it. The point was Ashwin stopped, waited until Buttler did go out of his ground, and then he took the bails off. So the problem with the law is that how can the umpires possibly judge that in the instance that they're out there? For starters, they're going to need third umpires, to have a split screen, in order to judge it. But, an umpire's got to be watching for a no ball, first of all, the bowler in his delivery stride. Then they've got to be looking up at a potential LBW. But we're asking them in that law to make a judgment on something which hasn't happened yet. Which is akin to the LBW, isn't it? They're trying to predict where the ball
Alison,
would go.
You're talking about the umpires and his duties, and the bowler and his delivery stride and what have you.
Yep.
I'd say, hey, how about the batsman, the non-striker? He's got to be she got to be very aware of leaving the crease only when the ball has been bowled. So really, there has to be responsibility there as well.
Oh, completely. If batsmen never are trying to steal an advantage, then a bowler would never have cause to make an attempted run out in that instance.
There was a delay. I get your point. Perhaps it could have been, and I can't speak for Ashwin, it could also have just about been Ashwin saying, should I not? And he said, well, it's critical, maybe I will.
But then the umpires should have just simply gone, no, not out, because by the law he actually was not out, and it should have then been a dead ball and you get on with it. And then I'm sure Buttler would have been, watching very carefully to make sure Ashwin delivered the ball before, he was making that forward motion to, get ready to run. But it was interesting, the MCC rather sat on the fence about this before they put out a second statement that was much stronger, and in their view, Jim, saying that they thought Ashwin's actions were not in the spirit of the game by stopping.
They were not in the spirit of the game. You could say that. But, the ball was live. And, what point is the ball live?
From the moment the bowler starts running in, isn't it?
Exactly. So the batsman must make sure he stays behind that line until he sees it delivered.
From the BBC World Service, this is Stumped on All India Radio.
Well, next on Stumped, it's time for the latest instalment in our Men's Cricket World Cup countdown. We're building up to the 2019 tournament in England and Wales by revealing our top 10 matches. And this week, it's time for...
Number 9.
Number 9 is the final of the 1992 World Cup, played in Australia and New Zealand. Now, it was a tournament of firsts, the first World Cup in the Southern Hemisphere, the first time players had worn coloured clothing, the first time matches had been played under floodlights, and a first victory for Pakistan.
And Imran marches back and turns now to run in to bowl to Illingworth. Illingworth takes 2 paces down the pitch, he's hit it high, he's going to be caught, yes! The catch is taken there by Ramiz. And Illingworth is out. Pakistan have won the World Cup. England are all out for 227 in the last over of their innings. And Pakistan have won the final by 22 runs.
Yes, so Pakistan beating England in the 1992 World Cup final at the Melbourne Cricket Ground. Charu, this match featured particularly highly on your shortlist, I know. Why was that?
Well, Alison, you've mentioned quite a few firsts already, but let me give you a few more points. The significance of a subcontinental team winning and indicating a wider spread of the game. I think that was the impact of that win under very different, by the way, or difficult conditions, and they were, I suspect, huge underdogs. So there's always a wonderful story there. Also, an incredible fight back from near elimination. I think they'd won only 1 out of 5 matches at that stage early in the tournament, or at some stage in the tournament. Also, one of the best all-rounders ever. And talismanic captain Imran Khan ending his career on a supreme high at the age of 40 with a bad shoulder. So lots of stories in there. And finally, of course, the whole cancer hospital story, because Imran's mother sadly capitulated to cancer, and he felt that Pakistan did not have a hospital dedicated for those afflicted with the deadly disease. So, of course, he dedicated that win to not only his team, but the creation of a cancer hospital in Pakistan, the first ever major hospital. So that was another wonderful story, far transcending the game of cricket. Although I do remember watching the match live, and I was aghast, just like I suppose the rest of the players were, or people back in Pakistan, because he kept saying, I, and my cancer hospital. And I think he forgot to thank his teammates at that point in time. But, one will have to forgive him.
Let's bring in one of the England players from that game now. Bowler Derek Pringle. Welcome along to Stumped.
Ah, hello.
It's great to speak to you. And that tournament was towards the end of your career, but I mean, it had to be really your finest hour, wasn't it, that match?
Well, you could look at it like that. I think that Headingley Test match in '91 was a good one as well, which I like to remember. But yeah, I mean, I always quite like the MCG. It doesn't matter what end you bowl. Often I was an into the wind up the hill bowler, but at the MCG it's perfectly flat, high stand, so no wind gets in, so it doesn't really matter which end you are. So always liked it for that reason. Had a decent game myself, so obviously, yeah, a few good memories, but we didn't come away with the cup.
Yeah,
and that's a great disappointment.
You took 3 wickets in the final, but arguably should have had 4. I mean, tell us about the one that got away, because it was a wicket that could have changed the course of history.
Well, Javed Miandad, to my mind, has always been one of the great white and red ball players, really. The ball, that white ball, I mean, they don't seem to do much these days, those white kookaburras, but in that tournament, I'd certainly getting it to swing quite a bit, and that final was no exception, and got a couple of wickets early on with a bit of movement, and then I thought I had Javed plumb LBW twice in 1 over, but umpire Steve Buckner decided they weren't adjacent enough for him to give them.
And Javed afterwards, any response from him as to that LBW appeal?
Well, I went into their dressing room to obviously congratulate him, because I knew Javed and Imran from county cricket days. They played for Sussex and Glamorgan respectively. Javed sort of just tapped his front leg and said, Allah smile on me today.
Hi, Derek. Congratulations on that fine bowling spell. But surely you guys considered yourself favourites. And what was the team talk before you went in saying, listen, third time, forget lucky, we've got to do this?
I can't recall the exact nature of the team talk, but I think we'd been playing pretty well. But just perhaps, if you were to look at it, from above what they call the helicopter view, I suppose we just lost a little bit of momentum. We'd lost to New Zealand in Wellington, having beaten them in a preamble to the World Cup 3-0, They'd obviously got their act together and played on sort of different kind of pitches to suit their plan of attack, which was to open with a spinner. And then we lost, of course, to Zimbabwe, but I'd picked up an injury by then, so I didn't play in that match. I think Chris Lewis was absent, and so was Dermot Reeves, so missing 3 sort of all-rounders. But, we should never have really lost to Zimbabwe, only chasing 120 and messed it up horribly. So there was suddenly a little niggle of doubt in there, but I still think because we dominated Pakistan in the group game in Adelaide before it had rained, that we fancied our chances.
Derek, great to have your memories. Thank you so much for joining us
Pleasure.
on Stumped.
From the BBC World Service, this is Stumped on All India Radio.
And we're just going to finish with another of the big stories from the first week of the IPL, Charu, because I saw a headline that rather summed it up for me, which was Pantimonium. Rishabh Pant, 78 not out in 27 balls in his opening game for the Delhi Capitals. Everyone's talking about him, aren't they?
Yeah, well, he's young, has a personality on him, happy to engage. He's a team man. So, yeah, a lot of people warm up to him. But he did begin with a bang, all right. Now, as if he had a point, or should we say pant, to prove. But by the way, his family name is pronounced Pant, just
yes.
for the record. So
The record.
perhaps the puns with punt will be more appropriate as we go along.
They look better in print.
Yeah, very little doubt, though, that he has emerged as the number one successor to Dhoni in all forms of the game, because he did very well in the test matches too in England, didn't he? Perhaps it is the way of the cricketing world now that wicket keepers have to be swashbuckling match winners with a bat. Now, there has been some talk about the fact that he's a little slipshod with his keeping, but, runs seem to matter a lot more. So I'm sure he will realize that he needs to up his keeping, but there seems to be, at this point in time, very little competition for Dhoni's successor. So maybe it is Pant the man.
From the BBC World Service, this is Stumped on All India Radio.
Well, that's all from this week's Stumped on All India Radio. We'll be back at the same time next week with more news and conversation from the world of cricket. My thanks to co-hosts Charu Sharma and Jim Maxwell, and to you for joining us. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Stumped is a BBC sport production for the BBC World Service in association with the Australian Broadcasting Corporation and All India Radio.